We turn now to Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who joins us from Minneapolis. Good morning, Senator. You heard Secretary Noem say what's happening in LA and the decisions being made about it at the federal level have to do with what happened in 2020 in Minneapolis and what she called the missteps of your governor, Tim Walz, at the time. You lived through all that. What would you advise Governor Newsom to do out in California now?
Every governor is going to make their own decisions based on the situation. In this case, Governor Newsom has made clear that he wants local law enforcement protecting the citizens, and he has asked the president not to inflame the situation. In Governor Walz's case, as you pointed out in the earlier segment, he did bring in the National Guard. I would also point out that on January 6th, I was there as well. And what I saw there was the president didn't bring in the National Guard when over 100 police officers were injured or hurt or worse. And so I think it is quite, we'll say, ironic, probably doesn't fit this situation, when you have got administration officials talking about protecting police officers after what happened on January 6th. And when I look at what's going on in California or across the country, of course, as a congressman said, you want to get dangerous criminals out of our midst, out of our communities. But when you look at where the American people are, they want to make sure you follow the law and that there's due process, and you don't want to inflame things by threatening to bring in the Marines or deporting people based on a mistake.
Senator, we're going to take a quick break and continue this conversation. You have such a key role in oversight of law enforcement on the judiciary. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We return now to our conversation with Senator Klobuchar. Senator, it seems that the president's use of the National Guard as he's federalizing them is somewhat novel. It's the first time since 1965 a president has activated a state's National Guard without a request from the governor. That's according to the Brennan Center for Justice. What concerns do you have about going in this direction? It's about 60 days that have been authorized in the proclamation he signed last night.
My concern, of course, is that this inflames the situation and that he is hell-bent on inflaming the situations. Individual governors look at their states and make decisions, but in this case, the president time and time again has shown this willingness to one, violate the laws we've seen across the country in many different situations outside of the immigration context, and two, inflame situations. So what do I think he should be doing right now? Who do I think he should be bringing in? I think he should be bringing in economists to talk to him right now about what's happening with the debt and with his big, beautiful betrayal of the middle class, to be talking to him about what's going on with the tariffs and how they are hurting small businesses. I think he should be bringing in the people that I talk to every day, regular people, farmers whose markets are drying up, people who are worried about their moms or their grandmas getting kicked out of their assisted living because of his Medicaid cuts. When Josh Hawley calls this morally bereft, that it's immoral to make these Medicaid cuts, and when Elon Musk comes in and says that this is a disgusting abomination, this bill, and when it is now triggering, get this, Medicare cuts, something that hasn't been discussed yet, because it adds so much to the deficit that rural hospitals are going to get cut. I think that's who he should be listening to right now, instead of his constant effort for shock and awe and trying to distract people what they care about most, which is the economy and their family situation.
We're going to talk about some of those very issues with Kevin Hassett, one of the president's top economic advisors, shortly, including that idea of Medicare being touched, which is being floated, but we haven't heard from the administration on in detail. But the president's putting immigration front and center here. We see in our polling that at least before what happened in LA, that this was broadly supported. 54% of Americans like his deportation policies. I'm wondering how much you worry that this puts Democrats on the back foot, that you are put in the position of defending someone like Abrego Garcia, who was just brought back to the United States from El Salvador and is now being charged by the Justice Department on these claims that he was involved somehow in human trafficking. This is that Maryland man who was, according to the Justice Department, wrongly sent to a prison in El Salvador on suspicion of being a member of a gang, which his family denied.
So Democrats believe in public safety. As a former prosecutor, it's been a lot of my life work working with law enforcement. And that means you don't inflame things and make it worse. And that is that you make sure that violent criminals aren't in our midst. But even when you look at your own poll that just came out this morning, a strong majority of people believe that people should at least follow the rule of law and have due process so people aren't mistakenly deported. When I look at the Abrego Garcia case, I see two things. The first is that you have to follow the law. The second is the charges will be dealt with in the justice system. That's how this works. And of course, they should have done that at the get-go and not wrongfully deported him and handled the charges in our country. But in the end, to me, this is about the rule of law and enforcing the laws. And again, when I look at your polling, 70% of the people said that while a number of them will support deporting violent criminals, I support that, okay? Right. But 70% of them said that these policies either don't help with the economy or they weaken the economy. They are not there. They want this president. They voted for him, a bunch of them in the middle, who in my state also voted for me. They want him to bring down costs. They don't want him to be kicking old people out of assisted living or cut the food assistance for veterans. They want them to be working on things that help them in their daily lives. That's what also comes out in your polling numbers.
Yep. As you know, Republicans say they're not cutting Medicaid, they're making it more efficient, but we will talk to Kevin Hassett about some of the specifics of what you just raised there. In our poll, though, it also shows among those polled that congressional Democrats are overwhelmingly seen as ineffective in challenging Trump. 71% of Democrats say their leaders are ineffective. You are in Democratic leadership. Why are they wrong?
So when you look at what's happening here, Trump is doing some really bad things to people, right? Small businesses are closing down. The economy has retracted in the first quarter. And when I get out there talking to independents, Republicans, or Democrats, they're basically saying the same thing. They're really scared of what's happening right now to their families, and they want to see leadership. So we cannot be the party of the status quo. That is for certain. And I'm actually really excited about our new candidates that are going to be running in the midterms. The recruiting is going on. And when you look at the actual facts, the actual numbers, look over at my neighbors over in Wisconsin for the Supreme Court race, where 10 Trump counties were flipped from red to blue because people have had it with this. Or look at some of the legislative races around the country, Margaret. Our constituents are standing up, and we are by their side, whether they're Democrats, moderate Republicans, or independents. They are showing up at rallies. They are voting. That's the number one most important thing. Democratic attorney generals are bringing cases in court that the public supports. They don't want to see veterinarians eliminated from the USDA, or they don't want to see funding frozen for cancer trials. And then you look at Congress. We are holding them accountable with votes. All we need is 4 Republicans to stand up against what Josh Hawley calls immoral Medicaid cuts, just 4 of them. All we need is 4 Republicans to stand up against these food assistance that throws millions of people, veterans, seniors, kids. 40% of the people that get food assistance are kids. To stand up against shifting money over to the states so Pennsylvania would suddenly get a huge amount, millions of dollars shifted over to them, or over in North Carolina, where you've seen over 500 million shifted. People need to stand up. The Republicans need to stand up. To me, that's leadership. Not defending the status quo for our party, but moving forward with a forward-thinking agenda and new energy.
All right, understand. Senator Klobuchar, thank you for your time today. We'll be right back. We're joined now by the director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. He joins us from the White House. Good morning to you.
Hey, Margaret. Good morning.
So I do want to allow you to respond to some of the very specific criticisms that Senator Klobuchar made. One of the things she brought up was something that, frankly, the Senate Majority Leader seemed to acknowledge was under discussion, and that was touching Medicare, making some kind of adjustment. He said anything we can do that's waste, fraud, and abuse is open to discussion. Is the White House open to any discussion around Medicare?
Well, first of all, what's happening is that the senators, respecting the legislative process, are discussing what they think that they can put on the table. And the president has made it clear that ending waste, fraud, and abuse, and giving benefits to illegals, and giving benefits to people who are able-bodied workers, those are his high priorities. If the Senate comes up with other things they'd like us to look at, I guess we would have a look at them. But there have been a lot of false stories about Medicare being on the table, and it's totally not on the table. The way that was covered in the news a couple of weeks ago was that in the end, when the budget process ends, if they don't waive the budget caps, then there's going to be reductions across the board in spending, and that's what no one would intend, and no Democrat would vote for that. But that was covered as our intent to go after Medicare, and it was just a big fake news story last week.
Okay, so Leader Thune and Leader Johnson and Speaker Johnson have said anything with waste, fraud, and abuse. But you right now are taking
waste, fraud, and abuse is the same.
Understood. But you were taking Medicare off the table. The White House says don't do it.
No, but I've seen a massive amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, and I've not been briefed on Medicare waste, fraud, and abuse.
Okay.
But if they find something, then of course we would look at it.
You would look at it. Senator Hawley was also brought up by Senator Klobuchar. And Missouri Senator has made it clear he wants to see changes to the increased co-payment requirements for Medicaid. That was in the House version that was sent over to the Senate. Are you comfortable with this House bill as it is written? What do you want to see done to Medicaid?
Right. Again, what we want to see done now is we want the Senate to pass the bill, and then we want the House and the Senate to work out their differences while negotiating with us. And right now, the Senate has to get the votes they need to pass the bill, and we're supporting them in that process. But you also need to be mindful when you're thinking about this that one of the things that we put out a report for the Council of Economic Advisors that if the bill doesn't pass, then they estimate that this would cause a reduction of GDP by 4%. We'd be in a deep recession. We'd lose 6 or 7 million jobs, and those people, almost all those people, would lose their insurance. And so this idea that the only person who ever is going to get insurance is someone who's getting it from the government is just incorrect. And if we create the jobs that we have in the bill, then we're going to create a heck of a lot more insurance than what we're talking about in waste, fraud, and abuse.
So you're open to what Senator Hawley is looking to change, though. That's what I understand.
I'd have to go see what he has, and I'd want to look at the fine details before I say I'm open it. And I also would want to talk to the president about the specific matter, which I've not done. Okay.
So one of the other massive influences on the economy right now is the trade war, particularly with China. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow in London, the Treasury Secretary, the Trade Representative, and the Commerce Secretary are going to meet with Chinese officials. Treasury Secretary Bessent told us last Sunday that the recent tension was around exports of critical minerals. When will those exports resume, and what do you expect to come from tomorrow's meeting?
Right. Those exports of critical minerals have been getting released at a rate that is, higher than it was, but not as high as we believe we agreed to in Geneva. And President Trump, being a deal maker, talked with President Xi, and he said, let's take, our senior guys and the people who are the same level as you, let's have them meet somewhere, and let's get these things cleared up, and then we'll clear up what you don't like that we've agreed to release on our side, and we're going to shake hands about it. He literally said, I want to meet in London, and I want to shake hands on it so that we know we've got a deal. And then after that, I think there was a very affable exchange about President Trump visiting China and President Xi coming here. And so I'm very comfortable that this deal is about to be closed, and it's going to be closed not with a bunch of staffers and bureaucratic language, but with handshakes. So that's the way President Trump operates.
But same terms, nothing new.
Well, I think that we can't talk about the terms that they're coming out with tomorrow because they're still working on it. But the point is we want the rare earths, the magnets that are crucial for cell phones and everything else to flow just as they did before the beginning of April. And we don't want any technical details slowing that down. And that's clear to them.
So our CBS News polling shows that most Americans don't like the tariffs. And most Americans don't think the Trump administration has a plan. We're also hearing from top economists, including the head of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, who said the rules are really unclear. and business leaders need certainty. When will they get that certainty from the administration?
Right. Well, you can be certain that there's going to be some tariffs, and the stuff that folks have been saying is going to happen to tariffs is inconsistent with what you and I have talked about before, Margaret. So what's going on, right, is that we've had a trade deficit with China forever and ever because they just want to sell stuff here so that they can create jobs in China and help, control their government. So if people are unemployed, then it's harder for a dictatorship to run. And so the point is just that if we put a tariff on them, then they're going to bear the tariff. And so what just happened? What just happened is that we had about $60 billion in tariff revenue in the U.S.
Yeah.
And inflation, every measure of inflation is the lowest that it's been for more than 4 years. And so all of our policies together are reducing inflation and helping reduce the deficit by getting revenue from other countries. And how much revenue? I think that you might have covered it. The Congressional Budget Office put out a 10-year estimate that says that the tariff revenue that's already in place right now is going to raise $2.8 trillion over the next 10 years. That's
right.
More than their own estimate, their own static estimate for the cost of this entire bill. So that's deficit reduction right there.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that stat because it made me wonder. You just said that one certainty is there will be tariffs. You are saying tariffs are staying put. That this is a constant source
reciprocal. You've seen deals.
Right,
You've seen deals. Yes, and exactly where they are, we're working it out, and we're opening up markets.
Yeah, but
so
the
that
deals. This is where I'm stuck because deals is about negotiating down the tariffs. So that's a diminishing source of revenue over time. But are you saying that there will be blanket tariffs of
last year?
What percent?
Last year, before we got here, we were raising $80 billion a year in tariffs. Right now, the CBO projects that we're going to get $2.8 trillion over the next 10 years. Exactly where the number ends up is going to depend on how much foreign countries open up their markets to our products and how well they treat our farmers.
So you don't know how much revenue you're going to have.
But revenue was $80 billion last year. Tariff revenue is not going away. That's what I'm saying.
But we don't know what the tariffs are going to be.
We're negotiating them on a country-by-country basis. We've got a whole bunch of trade deals. We've got a trade deal with the UK that's already, you can see what the trade deal with the UK is now.
Right, so it's a fluctuating number. It's not a constant. But before I let you go, the Senate Finance Chair, I know you were in this meeting at the White House this week.
Sure.
He indicated quadrupling the state and local tax deduction or SALT tax is not something he's interested in doing. They don't have the politics in the Senate like they do in the House that would require it, right? So is the White House committed to keeping this quadrupling of the SALT tax deduction as it is?
The president has said that he supports changing the law, the state and local tax deduction. And this is a very, it's a horse trading issue with the Senate and the House. And again, the president has listed his priorities on the tax bill. And it's no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. You know them all. And the Senate and the House, they know that those priorities for the president are red lines. And then on the other side, they're negotiating what they're going to negotiate because there's a differing level of support in the Senate that there was in the House. And in the end, the one thing we need, the president wants, is a bill that passes and passes on the 4th of July. So
Senator Crapo needs to prepare himself that is staying as the House wrote it.
He's got to work it out with the House.
Okay. Kevin Hassett, thank you for your time this morning.
Guys.
We'll be back in a moment. We turn now to the international efforts to alleviate the extraordinary humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And we're joined by the CEO of Save the Children, Janti Soeripto. Welcome back to Face the Nation.
Thank you, Margaret.
So there are 1 million children in Gaza in desperate need. The UN says the 11-week Israeli blockade has caused the rate of young children suffering from acute malnutrition to triple. What are you able to get in to help?
So since March 2nd, Save the Children has been able to get nothing in whatsoever.
Even though the blockade's over?
Even though the blockade is formally over, we haven't been able to get any of the 50 trucks that we have around Gaza on the border ready to go in. We haven't been able to get anything in.
Why?
So our staff are operating currently still with what we have. We have dwindling stocks, medical supplies, therapeutic malnutrition treatment for children, very young children. We're still working where we can and delivering goods while we can, but these stocks are dwindling fast.
What's the choke point? Why can't your trucks get in?
We haven't gotten any authorization to get them in.
From the Israeli authorities?
Yes.
Is the U.S. government helping at all?
I think there's an effort. I think there's a recognition that the humanitarian situation as it is completely untenable, that we're looking at mass starvation of innocent civilians and above all very young children, as you said. So there's attempts being made. We think that those attempts currently are completely ineffective and inadequate.
The director of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza told CBS this morning that only a few hours remain before the generators in the hospital shut down because they don't have enough fuel to keep them going. What are your medical workers seeing on the ground? What happens if a hospital like that can't function?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. It's completely abhorrent. We're hearing stories from colleagues in Gaza that are talking about children who have to undergo surgery and then they wake up during the surgery because there's not enough anesthetics. So that is what's happening. That is what it looks like.
That is horrific.
It is.
The UN office that oversees these efforts have warned as well that kids are leaving households because their parents are gone.
That's right. There's thousands and thousands of children who've lost one or more parents, lost their immediate family. So yes, we'll have kids, young kids, taking care of their younger siblings, trying to survive.
What does that do to a society?
It's unbelievable what's happening to this generation of 2 million people in Gaza. You know, the trauma is hard to overestimate. We're hearing mothers tell us that now their children are essentially waiting their turn to die.
How does your staff continue to function when they're told things like that?
It's horrific, as you can imagine. So we have almost 200 staff there, almost all of them Palestinians. And can you imagine, they still go out every day. They have their own children to take care of. They can't feed their own kids adequately. They still go out every day trying to deliver, give medical assistance to kids and mothers where they can, hand out food whilst we still have it, trying to give people trauma counseling whilst if we can reach them. But it is incredibly difficult. They're just trying to survive, almost, I think, pushing away, thinking about the trauma too much, because otherwise it's very difficult, I think, to get up and go to work.
So your organization does help like this, emergency help like this around the world. The Trump administration has called on the UN to work with this new organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's got the Israeli government support to deliver aid. We've seen a number of deadly shootings documented in proximity to their posts, a lot of criticism. They told the public yesterday that they'd received threats from Hamas, but then they didn't share details of that with CBS when we asked. Do you know what's happening? Because this is a US-backed organization.
It seems so. We have given a lot of input and shared our concerns. We and all the other operational agencies operational in Gaza have shared our concerns. With this new mechanism, we thought the existing mechanism worked just fine. When we had the pause in fighting from January till March, as you recall, we got trucks and trucks of supplies in at scale. We were able to deliver. We treated children with malnutrition. We did vaccinations. We did medical care, etc. The hospitals were operating. There was fuel to operate that generator in Al-Shifa Hospital, and that worked. So this current new mechanism doesn't seem to work. The failings seem to play out exactly in the way that we warned against. It is also a militarization of aid. If you put men with guns near to a distribution point and then you ask a desperate, starving population to come and walk for miles to get boxes of food, you're going to create crowd control issues and increased risk of harm to an already incredibly desperate population.
And boxes of food are not what you can give to a child who's in the midst of starvation.
Exactly right. It is completely inadequate support as well.
Janti Soeripto from Save the Children, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.